So, Brian, you did a phone interview with the president of the United States. What is his read on this?
So I asked him, how do you get the prices down? I know how much you care about oil and gas. And he says, tell these tankers to get to it. We've wiped out most of their launchers. Here's exactly what he said. These ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts. There's nothing to be afraid of. They have no navy. We sunk all their ships. He went on to say, he said, look, yeah, there's risk in the region. The region's volatile. There are launchers. There's just about 150 left. That's just about 20% of totals. They can't regenerate. They can't make any more. And we are in the region ready to act quickly on all these type of attacks. Now, I think they're going to get some additional naval assets in there to do some escorting. But there was a tanker that came through yesterday.
Successfully.
Successfully. No problem. And he's saying, come on, guys. Get to it.
So I want to discuss the current oil situation as it pertains to Iran today, because we just witnessed something pretty interesting, which was that this morning, U.S. oil prices suddenly began to drop. This is, of course, breaking a long-time trend of them increasing alongside global oil prices of every day of this war for very obvious reasons. If the Persian Gulf is closed down, then the global oil supply is choked off, and that's why, of course, prices are going to go up due to supply and demand. But what does it mean now if they're beginning to either decrease or slow down their trend of current inflation? Well, to me, if we are to believe the logic of follow the money, that does seem to suggest that something positive is about to happen here. And it's worth noting that Trump today is set to make a major announcement as it pertains to oil. And we don't know, I don't have any insider info as to what exactly that will be. It could be the announcement that the Strait of Hormuz is now open, that agreement has been reached with the Gulf states, that they're going to turn back on oil production. It could mean that the U.S. is tapping into its own strategic oil reserves, or it could even mean a ceasefire with Iran. Again, we have no idea, but it would seem to vindicate the Trump rhetoric throughout this conflict that this is going to be something over the span of weeks, not several months, not several years. And so if the argument was that, hey, yeah, sure, gas prices are expensive right now for obvious reasons, but this is a temporary blip on the radar, the current trend in the oil market following recent Trump announcements does seem to be backing that up. We're saying that with some degree of nuance because, hey, it's a temporary thing. Oil prices are very volatile. But I do want to discuss this current situation here today, as well as the reasons why that could be the case. Of course, the U.S. has been offering security guarantees. We did just see over the weekend one of the first tankers now move successfully through the Strait of Hormuz with U.S. escorts. So what exactly is going on here? And by the way, what does it mean in terms of what gas prices will look like by the time of the midterms? Because obviously that's the political angle of this. That is very important. Let's break down all of it. First, though, guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date and never miss our latest videos. And that said, so take a look at this. U.S. oil prices today. Suddenly, you can see on this chart, right? So obviously they're going up, suddenly started to go down pretty dramatically, and they extended their reversal. Now dropping below, at the time of this post, below $100 a barrel, right? So now we're going back below that line and just up 9% on the day. We are witnessing one of the biggest daily crude oil reversals in terms of how the price went from here all the way down to here in history. And again, markets don't suddenly change like this on accident, right? I would go with the opinion that there's something that Trump has already told oil suppliers and domestic production in our country, at least, that, hey, this is about to happen. And that's why, without any public confirmation of why, right, you start to see those numbers drop. But that said, let's break down the potential reasons, or maybe multiple set of reasons why this could be the case. I'd like to point out that just yesterday, the Trump administration made the announcement that a large tanker had safely made its way through the Strait of Hormuz, according to Secretary Chris Wright. And so, as we pointed out previously, the U.S. federal government had announced it would provide insurance to tankers through the Strait of Hormuz because obviously the mainline companies no longer wanted to insure oil tankers moving through such a dangerous part of the world. And that even potentially includes, right, U.S. military support. Our Navy's going to be escorting these boats. And that happened yesterday. Now this is happening in the oil markets today. Is some stability coming to the Persian Gulf as it pertains to the oil supply? supply.
Yeah, the plan is to get oil and natural gas and fertilizer and all the products from the Gulf flowing through the straits before too long. And I may break a little news here, but one large tanker has already gone through the straits with no issues at all. So as the general just described, we're massively attriting their ability to strike with missiles and drones, and that rate of attrition will increase in the coming days. So we'll be cautious, we'll be careful, but energy will flow soon. It's one of the reasons the president had to move on this war. Iran has just terrorized America, the neighborhood, and energy markets for 47 years.
Yeah, so that is certainly a big development that is going to have a significant effect, yes, on global markets, because if it's now being announced that tankers slowly but surely are moving through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz again, and they did so safely under U.S. protection, then hey, perhaps it is the case that the U.S., first of all, has ensured its sort of first job here of protecting the security of oil prices and key shipping lanes, and that secondly, perhaps also the Iranian military capacity to harass those ships in the Persian Gulf. Keep in mind, we announced previously how many Navy ships they had lost, and obviously the amount of ballistic missile capacity there that was destroyed, that, hey, no matter how many missiles or ships that Iran still claims on paper it has left, the overall threat level that they are posing already in the span of just over a week has significantly decreased. Very big and very good positive development there.
The Iranians are making a lot of threats with their words, but if you look at their actions with respect to their military, they're not as strong or powerful as they were 9 days ago. That is for sure. We have completely wiped out their Navy. Their Navy is now deemed combat ineffective. Their retaliatory strikes with ballistic missiles has decreased 90%. And as their attacks are decreasing, the power and prowess of the U.S. military is increasing.
Now, you could certainly try to claim that this is all just Trump administration propaganda, and no, we're not winning. This is going to be a forever war. This is a complete disaster. And that's fair. That's your opinion to do so. But my rebuttal to that is, okay, but forget what the Trump administration's publicly saying. Look at what's happening. Why would tankers start to begin thinking it's safe enough to move through the Strait of Hormuz? Explain the change today in energy prices, if not the fact that the Trump tagline that this was going to be very temporary and a very speedy victory for the United States was not accurate or true. Now, furthermore, last night, Trump put out this statement saying the following, quote, "Short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, is a very small price to pay for the USA, world safety and peace. Only fools would think differently," coming from President Trump. And a lot of people were unhappy with this statement. They said it's out of touch. It makes it sound like people now suddenly don't care about gas prices or something. But that's not how I read it. Frankly, I kind of saw this not really intended to be a public message directly at everyday Americans, but rather to me, it was about global big-time investors, the oil companies, other world leaders themselves. I read this as Trump basically saying, do not panic, right? And if we are to believe some of the signs that I'm breaking down today, it does seem to vindicate the Trump position that this energy crisis is something that's only going to last the span of days to weeks rather than months to years, as, say, the Biden administration Ukraine gas crisis had.
Look, you never know exactly the time frame of this, but in the worst case, this is a week's. This is not a month's thing. This is Iran has continued to build up their capabilities, first a massive expansion of their missile program, so that they can shield the completion of their nuclear program. It is simply unacceptable for the United States, for the Middle East geography, and for the world economy to have a terrorist regime with nuclear weapons and a gigantic missile arsenal. They've raised energy prices for Americans for decades. It's finally going to come to an end.
So look, I'm certainly not sitting here and telling you that a ceasefire or victory is on the immediate horizon, because I have no information on that. All we can look at are the trends of the money, right? The way global markets are responding this morning. And it does seem to suggest, at least right now, that the height of the panic here from the money was over. Things are slowing down a bit. There does seem to be a belief that, hey, this crisis is rather temporary. It'll be over very soon, and that's why we're going to start dropping the price of oil. You look at the prediction markets, by the way, on Kalshi, and you can see that over the past couple of days, traders believe that oil prices would get very high, but suddenly in the past several hours, those predictions you can see right here are starting to go down in terms of how high they think oil will spike. And so that's another, issue you could look at. Again, if we're to believe this logic of follow the money, and if the money believes that the economic and oil crisis here will end up only lasting a few weeks, it will be a temporary blip on the radar, then what does that also seem to suggest? An inside belief that the conflict and the fighting right now in the Middle East also will be temporary, right? Contrary to maybe the rhetoric that some are trying to put out there, you're seeing the signs this will not be a forever war, right? Because if tankers are moving again and they're thinking, oh, oil prices are starting to drop, and the investors obviously have a stake in all of this, then that does seem to indicate to us that this will not look like the rather permanent Biden energy crisis over the war in Ukraine. It might end up being something temporary. And this is very important to point out because as it pertains, obviously, to the midterms, the gas prices are going to matter. If this is an unresolved crisis by then, you can write off the midterms. Good luck. That's obviously a big problem. This is a political contention that Trump clearly has to be dealing with. But let's discuss that as well, because I think we likewise might see the signs that, well, in the end, this will be temporary. Take a listen.
We don't have an oil problem. And I think Secretary Wright was trying to explain that this is all speculation. This is all, you can almost argue, manipulation. This is what they call geopolitical risk. There's no formula for it. It could be an extra $10. It could be an extra $20. It could be an extra $30. So when you have a move like that, that's not based on fundamentals per se, it could be parabolic, which it is, through the roof. But when parabolic moves like that die down, they usually come down just as fast.
So I guess my big question is short because, a lot of people predicted that the tariffs would hurt the economy.
Right.
You were one of the ones that said, actually, this is going to be good for America. Looking at the war where we're at right now, was this the right call from the president, or do you think there's going to be some risks going in the midterms?
Well, there's always political risk, which is why things like this never get done, right? You have people who want to win elections instead of keeping America safe. This is 1,000% the right move with respect to where Iran was, to the threat to the rest of the world, and to the timing of it. I don't think a lot of folks understand how interconnected our world is. With the Greenland move, Panama, Venezuela, all of these things are incredibly important as we move into the next century. And we want to stay the preeminent nation in the world. So remember, oil was $82 when Trump took office. It was $50 when this began. That downward move will resume once this is resolved.
And this is a good point as it pertains to the midterms and our own domestic gas prices, because some might sit there and say that, well, even if the Iran conflict wraps up tomorrow, you still have to get oil production in the Middle East going again. It's going to take a long time for those markets to fully recover. But that, of course, assumes that U.S. oil and gas prices are being directly dictated by supply issues. And what I mean by that is to say that it's actually a myth that America gets a lot of its oil from that Persian Gulf region, from the Middle East. Actually, as a matter of fact, under Drill Baby Drill and the Trump agenda of establishing energy independence and America ultimately getting its oil from itself, not to mention, by the way, the opening of a new market in places like Venezuela, it is actually the current reality that America only gets 4 to 5% of its oil from the Persian Gulf. And so if we're reliant that little on Middle Eastern oil, then you may ask the question, okay, why are gas prices up so much? Because when you look at the current state today, right now, the national average of regular gasoline in America is $3.47 a gallon. Worth noting that is nowhere close to the $5 average price that we saw under the peak of the Joe Biden gas crisis. But still, that is a significant increase from the $2.80 to $2.90 it was, in some cases much lower than that, right, before the war. And as Charles Payne there points out, it's not because literally America doesn't have the oil. It is simply sort of hype and fear, right? Geopolitical risk is causing U.S. oil to increase, not so much any real sense of actually we're running out of the supply of oil, right? It's not a supply and demand issue as much as it is just geopolitical risk. And that might all sound confusing. Hopefully it makes sense here what I'm explaining, but that is to say, right? America doesn't necessarily need Middle Eastern oil. In terms of national security, we have plenty of our own, and we have plenty in our own hemisphere that, we are able to rely on. So if Middle Eastern oil is in a crisis, you're going to see the economic market impacts just in terms of price, but not in terms of supply. What are we saying with all of that? Well, as Charles Payne is pointing out, that also means that once this crisis is over and the fear among the investors and the businessmen and the oil companies dies down, you're not going to have to sit here and wait months to years for the oil production in the Middle East to necessarily recover. No, it's basically just an insurance policy, right? Geopolitical risk that they're assessing right now. And so if that risk is taken off the table, you would see in the span of only a few days, right? It's going to happen very fast. Gas prices are going to drop way back down to close to where they already were before. And by the way, pending the way that this conflict ends up panning out, you could also see oil prices drop even lower than they were before if Iranian oil is now open to Western markets, because it's worth remembering what happened in the 1970s, why oil exploded in price under the Carter administration. That is because Iran was cut off from American markets and Western ones due to international sanctions and them closing off the country, essentially. So this is all to say, right, that if this ends up quickly, if this wraps up quickly, which the investors and the markets right now, as of today, seem like they believe, then the whole Trump narrative about this being a temporary blip on gas prices and nothing severe, no long-term crisis to be worried about, then that would be vindicated. Now, who knows? We could be completely wrong about that. I'm not acting on insider info. I'm just looking at the numbers here, but just some things here to consider, right? And why, if that all pans out, there's no reason to freak out about long-term gas prices or what it's going to look like during the midterms, because things in that case would look rather fine, and they will drop once again rather quickly if this war, as Trump is saying and as now investors seem to believe, will be wrapped up within the span of a couple of weeks. So just current updates there. Again, the oil prices there showing positive signs. Just wanted to explain the reasons why. That said, guys, there you have it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.